Some people spend their whole lives searching for a miracle, never realizing it may already be sitting quietly in the next room. William Castellano had built an empire where every door opened at the sound of his footsteps. Every order was obeyed before it was fully spoken, and every problem seemed to disappear with enough money. Yet nothing in his vast fortune, none of his influence, none of the specialists he had flown across the country aboard private jets, had ever managed to restore the light inside his 8-year-old daughter. Lily Castellano had been blind since the tragic accident that claimed her mother's life 4 years earlier. Doctors called it irreversible. Therapists called it a lifelong adjustment. William simply called it the one battle he could never win. Every evening followed the same exhausting ritual. Dinner would arrive untouched. The expensive grand piano in the corner remained silent. The nursery windows overlooked acres of perfectly maintained gardens, but Lily had never seen the roses bloom, the fountains sparkle, or the autumn leaves paint the grounds in shades of gold. She rarely smiled anymore. She rarely spoke unless spoken to. The mansion itself had slowly surrendered to her silence, until even the staff walked its marble hallways with softer footsteps, afraid to disturb the invisible sadness that lingered inside every room. That Wednesday night, William returned home just before 11 o'clock after another endless day of meetings. His tailored charcoal overcoat hung heavily across one arm as he crossed the foyer beneath the crystal chandelier. The mansion felt unusually still. His security team offered respectful nods before fading into the background. Mrs. Whitmore, the longtime house manager, quietly informed him that Lily had refused dinner again. William merely closed his eyes for a second before continuing toward his study. He had heard the same report hundreds of times. Then something stopped him. A sound. At first it was so faint he thought exhaustion was playing tricks on him. But as he stood motionless beneath the warm glow of a wall sconce, he heard it again. Laughter. Not polite laughter. Not forced laughter. A child's genuine, carefree giggle echoed softly from the second floor. William's heartbeat slowed instead of quickened. For a moment, he simply listened, almost afraid the sound would disappear if he moved. Lily hadn't laughed like that in nearly 3 years. Without making a sound, he climbed the grand staircase one careful step at a time. The closer he came to her bedroom, the clearer the voices became. One belonged to his daughter. The other belonged to someone unexpected. Naomi Carter, the new housemaid who had arrived less than 2 weeks earlier. William reached the hallway outside Lily's room and instinctively stopped before the partially opened door. Inside, there was no expensive electronic learning device, no famous child psychologist, no celebrated storyteller hired from New York. Naomi sat cross-legged on the thick cream-colored rug beside Lily's bed, holding no book in her hands at all. Instead, she closed her eyes and painted an entire world using nothing but her voice. "Can you hear the river?" she whispered gently. "It's only a few feet away now. Listen to how the water dances over smooth stones. And right above us, 2 bluebirds are arguing because one found the brightest red berry before sunrise." Lily smiled so brightly that the room itself seemed warmer. Her small fingers rested lightly against Naomi's sleeve as though every word had become something she could almost reach out and touch. William remained frozen outside the doorway, watching without interrupting. For the first time since losing his wife, he wasn't looking at a room filled with grief. He was looking at hope quietly finding its way home. William did not enter the room that night. He quietly stepped backward until the laughter faded behind the heavy oak door, then walked to his study carrying a feeling he could neither explain nor dismiss. He poured himself a cup of black coffee that soon turned cold in his hands because his thoughts refused to leave the image he had just witnessed. Naomi Carter had done in 20 minutes what years of renowned specialists, expensive therapies, and carefully designed treatment programs had failed to accomplish. She had reached Lily without asking her to change who she was. The next morning the mansion returned to its familiar rhythm. Housekeepers polished marble floors until they reflected the morning sunlight. Gardeners trimmed hedges with mathematical precision. Security officers rotated shifts with quiet discipline. William stood near the dining room window watching the estate awaken while reviewing documents on his tablet, yet his attention wandered whenever he heard footsteps in the hallway. Naomi moved through the house, almost invisibly. She greeted every employee with genuine warmth, folded fresh towels with practiced efficiency, watered the indoor orchids without being reminded, and thanked the kitchen staff every time they handed her supplies. There was nothing extraordinary about her appearance. Her dark curls were tied into a neat bun. Her uniform was spotless but simple. She spoke softly and never attempted to draw attention to herself. If anything, she seemed determined to disappear into the background. Mrs. Whitmore approached with the morning schedule in her hands. William listened before asking a question that surprised even himself. The new maid, Naomi Carter. What do we know about her? The house manager looked briefly confused before answering. Excellent references, sir. Very dependable. She worked at a children's community center in Detroit before relocating to Chicago to care for her grandmother during her final illness. After that, she accepted domestic work. She has been nothing but respectful. William nodded without another word, but one detail remained with him. A children's community center. That afternoon he noticed something else. Lily had not remained inside her bedroom. Instead, she sat beside the sunroom windows with her hands resting on a small wooden box. Naomi sat beside her. Rather than reading from a printed page, she gently placed different objects into Lily's hands. A smooth seashell, a pine cone, a feather, a small piece of polished driftwood. Every story has a shape, Naomi said gently. If you cannot see the ocean, you can still feel how the waves polished this shell for hundreds of years. Imagine the sound every time your fingers touch it. Lily smiled as she slowly traced the shell with both hands. Does the ocean really sing? She asked. Naomi smiled. Every beach has its own song. Some whisper, some roar, some sound like they are laughing with the wind. Lily laughed softly again. I think I like the laughing beach. William watched from the opposite side of the hallway without revealing himself. It occurred to him that Naomi never reminded Lily of what she could not do. She only invited her to discover what she still could. There was no pity in her voice, no careful sympathy, only quiet confidence, as though she genuinely believed the world remained wide open for a little girl who experienced it differently. As evening approached, William found himself doing something he had not done in years. Instead of leaving for another business dinner, he canceled every appointment on his calendar. When his assistant asked whether something urgent had happened, he simply replied, "No, something important has." For the first time and longer than he cared to admit, the most valuable place in his world was no longer his office, the boardroom, or the countless properties bearing his name. It was the hallway outside a little girl's bedroom, where hope seemed to arrive every night with the quiet footsteps of a housemaid who never realized someone else was learning from every story she told. Over the next several days, William quietly changed his routine without announcing it to anyone. Meetings that once stretched late into the evening now ended before sunset. Business dinners were postponed. Weekend travel disappeared from his calendar. His executives assumed he was preparing for a major investment. Even Mrs. Whitmore believed he had finally decided to spend more time at home after years of endless work. None of them knew the truth. Every night, just before 8 o'clock, William found himself standing in the same shadowed hallway outside Lily's bedroom, listening without making a sound. He never interrupted. He never revealed his presence. He simply listened as Naomi transformed ordinary moments into extraordinary adventures. One evening she described a thunderstorm as though it were a giant orchestra rehearsing above the clouds, every rumble a drum, and every raindrop a tiny violin playing against the roof. Another night she invited Lily to imagine baking warm cinnamon bread inside a little cottage surrounded by maple trees whose leaves whispered secrets whenever autumn arrived. Sometimes she gently tapped her fingertips against the wooden nightstand to imitate the footsteps of curious rabbits. Sometimes she softly crinkled tissue paper to become the wings of butterflies flying through a summer meadow. Lily followed every sound with complete attention, her imagination filling every corner that her eyes could not. William had purchased the most advanced educational technology available. He had commissioned custom tactile books from leading specialists. He had arranged sessions with respected child development experts from Boston, Seattle, and San Francisco. Every recommendation had been followed exactly. Every invoice had been paid without question. Yet none of those remarkable people had ever unlocked what Naomi reached so naturally. She never tried to teach Lily how to live without sight. Instead, she taught her how to experience wonder through every other gift she still possessed. The realization settled heavily inside William. For years, he had approached every challenge as something that could be solved with enough resources. He believed every obstacle had a price, every solution a contract waiting to be signed. But what Naomi offered could not be purchased because it came from patience, imagination, and genuine presence. One afternoon, he noticed Lily sitting alone in the conservatory while Naomi finished arranging fresh flowers nearby. Instead of waiting quietly, Lily turned her face toward the sunlight streaming through the glass ceiling. She smiled before speaking. "The sun feels warm today. I think the roses are opening." Naomi looked surprised. "How did you know that?" Lily lifted her chin proudly. "You said flowers wake up when the morning feels like a warm hug. Today feels exactly like that." Naomi laughed softly. "I think you are right." William remained hidden behind the doorway, overcome by a feeling he had almost forgotten existed. Hope no longer arrived in dramatic moments. It appeared quietly, hidden inside simple conversations that most people would have overlooked. That evening, after Lily had gone to sleep, William remained alone in the library. He stared at an old family photograph resting on the fireplace mantel. It showed his wife holding a much younger Lily beneath a bright summer sky. For years he had avoided looking at that picture because it reminded him of everything he had lost. Tonight it reminded him of something different. His daughter was finding pieces of happiness again, not because someone had restored her eyesight, but because someone had reminded her that life could still be beautiful. As William gently returned the photograph to its place, he whispered words that no one else in the mansion would ever hear. "Maybe I have been trying to fix the wrong thing all along." The following week brought a quiet transformation that even the household staff began to notice, although no one dared to speak about it openly. Lily no longer stayed inside her room from morning until bedtime. She wandered through the mansion with a confidence that had been absent for years, her fingertips brushing gently across polished wooden railings, textured wallpaper, cool stone columns, and fresh flower arrangements that Naomi carefully described every day. Together, they created little adventures hidden inside ordinary routines. Every hallway became a forest path. Every staircase became a mountain trail. Every garden breeze carried invisible stories waiting to be discovered. Naomi never hurried her. If Lily stopped to listen to birds singing outside an open window, Naomi stopped too. If Lily wanted to identify herbs growing near the kitchen by their scent alone, Naomi patiently held each small leaf beneath her nose until she guessed correctly. It became a game neither of them seemed eager to end. William noticed another change that surprised him even more. Lily had begun asking questions again. For years, she had answered politely whenever someone spoke to her, but curiosity had almost disappeared from her voice after the accident. Now she wanted to know why leaves sounded different after rain, why fireplaces crackled louder in winter, why cinnamon smelled warmer than vanilla, and whether snowflakes made a sound before they reached the ground. Naomi never dismissed a single question. She answered each one with equal parts imagination and truth, encouraging Lily to build pictures inside her heart instead of mourning the pictures her eyes could no longer see. One afternoon, William returned home earlier than expected and found the library unusually lively. Lily sat beside the fireplace while Naomi placed different fabrics across the table. Soft velvet, rough burlap, smooth silk, thick wool. "Close your hands," Naomi encouraged gently before smiling at her own mistake. "You already have them closed. Tell me what season each one feels like." Lily giggled. She pressed the velvet against her cheek. "This feels like Christmas because everybody wears fancy clothes." She reached for the wool. "This one is winter because it wants to hug you." She held the silk between her fingers for several quiet seconds. "Spring," she whispered confidently. "It feels like flowers dancing." William remained completely still behind the bookshelf, unable to interrupt the lesson unfolding before him. Naomi was not simply teaching Lily about textures. She was teaching her that the world remained full of beauty waiting to be experienced in different ways. There was no sadness in the room. There was only discovery. Later that evening, William invited Mrs. Whitmore into his study. He asked a question that made the experienced house manager pause. "Has Naomi ever asked for anything? More time off? A raise? Better accommodations?" Mrs. Whitmore smiled softly before shaking her head. "No, sir. She always says she already has everything she needs." William looked down at the papers spread across his desk, but he was no longer reading them. People had spent years asking him for opportunities, promotions, investments, and favors. Naomi had asked for nothing at all. Yet somehow she had given his family something priceless without ever realizing it. As darkness settled outside the mansion, William once again found himself standing quietly outside Lily's bedroom. Through the slightly open door, he heard Lily whisper one simple sentence before falling asleep. "Miss Naomi, tomorrow can we visit the beach again?" Naomi laughed softly. "Of course we can." Lily smiled beneath her blanket. "I cannot wait to hear the waves." William closed his eyes for a brief moment, realizing that his daughter had never actually stood on a beach in her life. Somehow, without leaving the house, Naomi had already taken her there. As September slowly gave way to the cool mornings of early October, the mansion settled into a rhythm that felt strangely unfamiliar. It was no longer defined by schedules, appointments, or the quiet efficiency of a perfectly managed estate. Instead, every afternoon carried the expectation of another small adventure. Lily looked forward to each day with an excitement that had once seemed impossible. William found himself looking forward to them as well, although he rarely admitted it even to himself. One rainy afternoon, the windows shimmered beneath a steady curtain of gentle rain, turning the gardens outside into soft watercolor shapes. Naomi invited Lily into the music room instead of the library. The grand piano stood silently in the corner, untouched since Lily's mother had last played it years before. Dust no longer covered the polished black surface, but no one had found the heart to lift its lid. Naomi did not walk toward the instrument. Instead, she opened a small wooden cabinet filled with everyday objects. A glass jar filled with dried beans, a handful of smooth river stones, a small brass bell, sheets of parchment paper, a wooden spoon. Lily tilted her head with curiosity. "What are we doing today?" Naomi smiled warmly. "We are going to build a rainstorm." Lily laughed. "Inside the house. Sometimes the best storms happen where nobody expects them." Naomi gently shook the jar of beans, creating the soft sound of distant raindrops. She rolled the smooth stones across a wooden tray until they echoed like water flowing through a creek. She crinkled the parchment slowly, letting it imitate leaves dancing beneath the wind. Finally, she rang the tiny bell once. That is the first ray of sunshine after the clouds move away. Lily closed her eyes instinctively, smiling as every sound blended into a world she could almost touch. "It feels beautiful," she whispered. "Can you see it?" Naomi answered after a thoughtful pause. "No, but I can imagine it with you." William had arrived home earlier than usual and paused outside the music room when he heard the unusual sounds. He quietly remained near the doorway, watching as Lily reached toward the invisible landscape Naomi had created. There were no expensive teaching tools, no complicated methods, only ordinary objects transformed by extraordinary patience. Then Lily asked a question that filled the room with unexpected silence. "Miss Naomi, who taught you to tell stories like this?" Naomi looked down at the small brass bell resting in her hand. Her smile softened, touched by memories that seemed both precious and painful. "A little boy taught me," she answered gently. "Someone I loved very much. He could not see the world the way most people could either, so every day we invented new ways to explore it together. We pretended that sounds had colors, that smells had shapes, and that every breeze carried a secret waiting to be discovered." Lily reached for Naomi's hand without hesitation. "Was he your friend?" Naomi squeezed her tiny fingers with quiet affection. "He was my younger brother." She said nothing more. She did not speak about loss. She did not explain why those afternoons had ended. She simply smiled and continued shaking the little jar until soft rain once again filled the room. William remained completely still beyond the doorway, feeling as though another hidden piece of Naomi's heart had quietly revealed itself. At last he understood that every story she shared with Lily carried more than imagination. Each one was preserving a memory of someone she still loved, turning old sorrow into new hope, one gentle evening at a time. The first week of October arrived with crisp mornings and clear skies, and for the first time in years Lily asked to eat breakfast in the sunroom instead of alone in her bedroom. Every member of the household noticed the difference. She greeted the kitchen staff by name, thanked the gardeners for describing the changing colors of the maple trees, and even asked one of the security officers whether the birds still gathered near the fountain every morning. The mansion no longer echoed with silence. It breathed with quiet conversations and unexpected laughter. Word of Lily's remarkable progress eventually reached Dr. Benjamin Harper, the pediatric rehabilitation specialist who had supervised her care since the accident. He had watched countless children learn to adapt to life-changing circumstances, but Mrs. Whitmore's recent reports sounded unlike anything he had encountered before. Curious, he accepted William's invitation to visit the estate. William welcomed him into the library before leading him toward the conservatory, where Lily and Naomi sat together at a small wooden table. Lily held several fragrant herbs in front of her, carefully identifying each one without hesitation. Rosemary, she said confidently after smelling the first sprig. Mint, she smiled at the second. Lavender, she paused at the third before laughing softly. That one always smells like peaceful afternoons. Dr. Harper observed quietly without interrupting. Naomi never corrected Lily immediately when she hesitated. Instead, she asked gentle questions that encouraged her to trust her own senses. What memory comes to your mind? Naomi asked. Lily smiled. Grandma's quilt. Naomi nodded. Then you already know your answer. Lily lifted the final bundle proudly. Lavender. Dr. Harper looked toward William with unmistakable surprise. After nearly an hour of observation, he requested a private conversation inside William's study. The physician carefully removed his glasses before speaking. I have reviewed Lily's progress reports for years, and I have never seen this kind of emotional growth happen so naturally. William remained silent, waiting. Dr. Harper continued. Her eyesight has not changed, but something far more important has. She is engaging with the world again. Her curiosity has returned. Her confidence is growing. She is no longer defining herself by what she cannot do. William glanced toward the hallway, where Lily's laughter drifted faintly through the open door. Why now? He asked quietly. The doctor smiled thoughtfully. Because someone stopped trying to rescue her from blindness and started inviting her to explore life instead. Children do not only need instruction. They need imagination. They need someone who believes their future is still full of possibility. William lowered his eyes, recognizing every word as a description of Naomi. Dr. Harper gathered his notes before adding one final observation. Whatever Miss Carter is doing, I would encourage you to protect it. This is not replacing medical care. It is giving your daughter something medicine alone never could. After the doctor departed, William remained standing beside the tall windows overlooking the gardens. Outside, Naomi and Lily slowly walked along the stone pathway, counting birds by their songs instead of their appearance. Lily suddenly stopped and lifted her face toward the cool autumn breeze. The leaves are falling today, she said with quiet certainty. Naomi smiled. How can you tell? Lily laughed. Because the wind sounds softer when it has friends dancing with it. William felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. He realized that Lily no longer asked what she had lost. She had begun asking what she could still discover. And somewhere between a seashell, a feather, a rainstorm made from ordinary objects, and stories told without a single book, a housemaid had quietly accomplished what an entire world of experts had hoped for but never achieved. The following evening arrived with an unusual stillness that settled gently over the estate. A cool breeze drifted through the open windows, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and fresh cedar from the surrounding woods. Inside the mansion, lamps cast a warm golden glow across polished floors while the last traces of daylight disappeared beyond the gardens. Naomi had finished her regular duties and was preparing to return to the staff quarters when Lily found her waiting outside the library. Will we visit another place tonight? Lily asked with eager anticipation. Naomi smiled. I think tonight we should stay somewhere very close to home. Lily tilted her head. Where? Naomi reached for the little girl's hand. Right here? Because sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the people sitting beside us. They walked together toward Lily's bedroom, unaware that William had already returned earlier than expected. He stood quietly in the familiar hallway, but this evening something inside him felt different. For weeks he had remained hidden behind partially open doors, convincing himself that observing from a distance was enough. Yet every story he overheard had slowly dissolved another piece of the wall he had built around his own heart. As Naomi settled onto the rug beside Lily's bed, she did not begin with imaginary forests or distant beaches. Instead, she spoke softly. Close your eyes. Lily laughed. I already do. Naomi laughed with her. Then close your worries instead. Lily smiled. That is much harder. Naomi nodded gently. It is for grown-ups too. She picked up a small music box from the bedside table and slowly wound the tiny key. A delicate melody floated through the room, light and peaceful. Imagine a little cabin beside a quiet lake, Naomi whispered. The water is perfectly still. Pine trees stand tall around the shore. Every morning the sun warms the wooden porch before anyone wakes up. There is only one rule in that little cabin. Lily listened carefully. What is the rule? Naomi answered. Nobody has to be afraid of yesterday. Every sunrise is allowed to become a brand new beginning. The room became wonderfully quiet. William felt those words settle deep inside him. They no longer sounded like a story meant only for a child. They sounded like something he himself had needed to hear for years. Lily spoke after several thoughtful seconds. Do you think my mommy would like that cabin? Naomi smiled with gentle certainty. I think she would love knowing that every morning you wake up smiling. William slowly lowered his eyes. Since his wife's passing, he had spent every day trying to protect Lily from sadness, never realizing that his own grief had quietly surrounded her as well. Naomi had never tried to erase painful memories. She had simply made room for joyful ones to grow beside them. Before he could change his mind, William took one slow step forward. Then another. The old wooden floor beneath his shoes creaked softly. Naomi looked toward the doorway first. Lily immediately turned her face in the same direction. Daddy? She asked with quiet surprise. William finally entered the room instead of remaining outside it. There was no command in his voice, no carefully rehearsed speech. He simply walked across the room and lowered himself onto the rug beside his daughter and the woman whose kindness had changed the atmosphere of his home one quiet evening at a time. For a brief moment, none of them spoke. The music box continued its gentle melody while the autumn wind brushed softly against the windows. Then William looked at Naomi with sincere gratitude reflected in his eyes. Would it be all right, he asked quietly, if tonight I listened to the rest of the story too? Naomi looked at William for a quiet moment before offering a gentle nod. There is always room for one more listener, she said softly. William settled beside Lily, feeling strangely unfamiliar on the thick rug where Naomi had spent so many evenings. Boardrooms, private aircraft, and elegant banquet halls had always felt natural to him. Sitting cross-legged beside his daughter with nothing to accomplish except listening somehow required greater courage than any business negotiation he had ever faced. Naomi smiled before continuing the story. The little cabin by the lake welcomed everyone who arrived carrying a heavy heart. It did not ask what mistakes they had made. It only asked one question every morning. What beautiful thing will you notice today? Lily smiled as she rested her head lightly against her father's shoulder. What did the people answer? Naomi looked toward the softly glowing window. One person noticed the smell of fresh bread. Another noticed birds singing before sunrise. Someone else noticed that laughter sounded even sweeter after sadness had stayed for a very long time. William remained silent, but every sentence seemed directed toward him. For years he had measured success by contracts signed, companies acquired, and impossible goals achieved. He could not remember the last time he had stopped to notice something as simple as birds greeting the morning. When the story ended, Lily let out a peaceful sigh. I want to visit that cabin someday. Naomi smiled warmly. I think you already have. Lily laughed softly before sleep slowly carried her into quiet dreams. Neither William nor Naomi moved for several moments. The room was filled only with the gentle ticking of the bedside clock and the soft rhythm of Lily's breathing. Finally, William spoke in little more than a whisper. May I ask you something? Naomi nodded. Of course. William lowered his eyes before continuing. Why did you begin doing all of this? No one asked you to spend your evenings here. You have never requested overtime. You never expected recognition. Naomi folded her hands quietly in her lap. Because I know what loneliness sounds like. William looked up. Naomi continued with calm honesty. When my younger brother lost his eyesight as a child, people spent years telling him everything he could no longer do. Very few people reminded him of everything he still could. We created stories because stories never asked him to become someone different. They simply gave him another way to experience the world. She paused gently before adding. After he passed away, I promised myself that if I ever met another child walking through darkness, I would never let them believe darkness was the end of their story. William felt his throat tighten. He finally understood that every seashell, every imaginary beach, every gentle rainstorm made from ordinary household objects had been born from love that refused to disappear even after loss. Naomi had never been escaping her memories. She had been honoring them. William looked toward his sleeping daughter before speaking with complete sincerity. You have given Lily something I could never buy. Naomi smiled with quiet humility. I did not give it to her, Mr. Castellano. She already had it inside her. I only reminded her where to find it. Those simple words settled into the room with remarkable peace. In that moment, William realized the greatest gift Naomi had offered was not hope alone. She had restored something even more precious. She had quietly taught a father that healing does not always begin by changing someone's circumstances. Sometimes it begins when another human being chooses to stand beside them until they remember their own light. The days that followed no longer felt divided between employers and employees, between wealth and work, or between authority and obligation. Something quieter had taken root inside the Castellano estate. Every evening, just before the sun slipped behind the rows of maple trees, 3 people gathered in the same bedroom without ceremony. Lily waited eagerly on the rug with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Naomi arrived carrying nothing more than her gentle smile and endless imagination. William entered a few moments later, no longer as a distant observer hiding in the hallway, but as a father who had finally chosen to be present. Those evenings became the most important appointment on his calendar. Business associates quickly learned that meetings scheduled after 7 o'clock would be politely declined. Investors wondered why one of the busiest men in the country had suddenly become difficult to reach during the evening hours. William never offered elaborate explanations. He simply smiled and replied that he already had somewhere more important to be. One crisp Saturday morning, he invited Naomi into his study. The room that had once been filled only with contracts, financial reports, and business strategies now felt strangely different. Sunlight poured across the large oak desk, while family photographs occupied places that had remained empty for years. Naomi entered quietly, assuming there was another household assignment waiting for her. Instead, William stood and handed her a neatly folded letter. This is not a notice, he said gently. It is an invitation. Naomi looked at him with quiet curiosity before opening the envelope. Inside was a new employment agreement. Her responsibilities would no longer focus on housekeeping. Instead, William had created an entirely new position dedicated to Lily's education, daily enrichment, and emotional development. There was also one handwritten sentence beneath his signature. Thank you for helping my daughter discover joy again, and for reminding her father how to find it too. Naomi lowered the letter slowly, her eyes shining with quiet gratitude. Mr. Castellano, she began softly, I only did what anyone should do. William shook his head with a warm smile. No, you did what very few people remember to do. You gave someone your time when nothing required you to. That evening, Lily laughed louder than ever when William attempted to imitate the sound of an owl during one of Naomi's bedtime adventures. His performance was wonderfully terrible, and both Naomi and Lily dissolved into uncontrollable laughter. Even Mrs. Whitmore, passing quietly through the hallway, paused outside the door with a smile she could not hide. The mansion that had once echoed with silence now carried something far more valuable than luxury. It carried connection. Months later, visitors often remarked that the Castellano estate felt unexpectedly welcoming despite its enormous size. They admired the beautiful gardens, the elegant architecture, and the carefully maintained grounds. Few of them realized the greatest transformation had never happened in the buildings at all. It had happened inside 3 hearts that chose compassion over distance, presence over perfection, and kindness over obligation. Lily never regained her eyesight, but she learned to see beauty everywhere through sound, scent, touch, imagination, and love. William discovered that the strongest foundation he could ever build was not another business, but a relationship with his daughter. Naomi continued telling stories each evening, never seeking recognition for the lives she quietly changed. And as another peaceful night settled over the estate, the gentle sound of laughter drifted through the open bedroom window into the cool autumn air, carrying with it a simple truth that no amount of wealth could ever purchase and no hardship could ever diminish. Sometimes the brightest light enters a home through the quiet kindness of someone the world almost overlooked. And on that day, everyone inside the Castellano family remembered what true dignity, hope, and love looked like.